he never knew his wife was hiding a secret that could destroy his entire life until he found a photo labeled "Our Son." Who is this child, and why was he kept from him all these years? What he discovers behind a locked door will shatter everything he thought he knew, and nothing will ever be the same. At first, he was only looking for the insurance papers. The drawer stuck, whining as it slid open, and the smell of dust rose like a held breath. Receipts, old warranties, a passport sleeve, then a photograph, smaller than his palm, face down beneath folded scarves. He flipped it without thinking. A baby stared back at him, eyes glossy, mouth caught between wonder and cry. The room tilted. On the back, in ink that had bled slightly into the paper fibers, were 3 words: "Our Son." He felt the sentence land like a verdict. The child's cheeks were full, the hair dark, the chin unfamiliar. Not his. He stood there longer than made sense, listening to the house tick. He tried to place the picture in time. The edges were clean, the colors sharp. Not a relic, not something forgotten. He thought of the years they had spoken around the subject of children, skirting it like a bruise. Doctors' rooms, careful optimism, the quiet agreement to stop asking. This baby didn't belong to that story. He set the photo on the bed, then picked it up again, as if it might change. The background tugged at him, soft light, a pale wall. He knew those shadows, he knew that window. A tightness gripped his throat. The image had been taken somewhere he recognized, somewhere intimate, somewhere that had watched him sleep. He turned the photo over once more and traced the ink with his thumb. It wasn't fully dry. The stroke of the O had feathered at the edge. He imagined the pen hesitating, the breath before writing. "Our Son." He felt heat rush to his ears, a roar of blood that drowned sense. Questions rose, collided, fell apart. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, his wife's, light and unhurried, a rhythm he could pick from any crowd. Panic sharpened him. He slid the photograph back beneath the scars, smoothing the drawer as if it were skin. The drawer closed with a soft click. She paused at the door. He sat on the bed, hands empty, heart loud. When she spoke his name, it sounded ordinary, loving even. He answered, surprised his voice obeyed. As she crossed the room, he smelled ink, faint, metallic. His eyes went to her fingers. A blue smudge marked the side of her nail. He looked away before she noticed his stare, and in that moment he understood this was not a memory uncovered, but a secret just made. He lay awake later, counting the seconds between her breaths, replaying the blue smear and the damp shine of ink. He told himself to wait, to gather proof, to ask gently. Yet his pulse argued otherwise. Somewhere in the house, a drawer remembered his touch. Somewhere, a truth was still drying. When the lights went out, he imagined the photo warming under fabric, the letters darkening. Tomorrow, he promised, he would ask. Tonight, he would listen. The house answered with a creak, then silence. He did not sleep because discovery had already begun, and dawn felt like an interrogation waiting behind the door with lights on and witnesses inside. Morning came without relief. He moved through it like a guest in his own house, careful not to disturb anything that might look back at him. His wife stood at the counter, hair tied, humming softly as she poured coffee. The sound scraped at him. He watched her hands, searching for blue ink, for guilt, for anything that would confess without words. She noticed his stare and smiled, the practiced smile she used when nothing was wrong. Their marriage had learned that smile early. Years ago, silence had crept in quietly, not after a fight, but after too many careful conversations. They spoke about work, schedules, repairs. They did not speak about disappointment. When doctors stopped offering timelines and started offering sympathy, they learned how to change subjects with grace. Love remained, but it lived behind glass. He remembered when they used to argue loudly, passionately, the kind of arguments that ended in apologies and closeness. Now, conflict felt dangerous, like it might shatter something fragile they both pretended was solid. Silence became a pact. Silence became safety. At breakfast, she asked if he slept.
He said yes. The lie tasted bitter. She nodded, already elsewhere, scrolling through her phone. He noticed how she angled the screen away from him, subtle, practiced. It could have meant nothing. Everything could have meant nothing. That was the cruelty of trust stretched thin. All day, the photo pressed against his thoughts. At work, numbers blurred, emails went unanswered. He replayed the drawer opening, the soft resistance of fabric, the shock of that word, hour. He wondered how long secrets could exist inches away from him, breathing the same air. He wondered if silence had taught him this skill. That evening, he cooked while she showered. Steam fogged the hallway mirror, erasing their reflections. He set 2 plates down, evenly spaced, a habit formed over years. When she joined him, she spoke about a coworker's promotion, about traffic, about nothing that mattered. He listened too closely, measuring pauses, reading into breaths. He wanted to ask then. He imagined saying it calmly, placing the photo between them like evidence. But fear stopped him. Fear of answers, of watching the life he knew tilt and spill. He chose quiet again, hating himself for how easy it was. Later, they sat on opposite ends of the couch. The television murmured. She laughed at something unfunny, then checked her phone once more. A message lit her face briefly, softened it. He saw something there he had not seen directed at him in a long time. His chest tightened. She stood and said she was tired. As she walked down the hall, he followed at a distance, not thinking, just listening. At the bedroom door, she paused. Her voice dropped, intimate, urgent, meant for someone else. "He's asking questions," she whispered. He froze, the house suddenly too small, the silence finally broken by truth choosing its moment. He stood there, breath shallow, understanding arriving late. Whatever he had believed about their marriage was gone. Silence had not protected them. It had hidden everything. Tomorrow he would confront her. Tonight he would pretend to sleep. Down the hall, her footsteps faded, steady and unhurried. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, knowing the question was no longer if she was lying, but how far the truth would go. He listened to the refrigerator hum, to pipes settling, to the house performing innocence. In the quiet, he rehearsed questions and answers, promises and threats. Somewhere behind the walls, a phone vibrated, then went still. He did not move. He understood now that asking would change everything, and not asking had already done the same. In the morning, sunlight would expose what darkness had protected, and he would finally hear who else lived inside his life. The whisper replayed, sharp as a blade, refusing to fade away. He waited 2 days. 2 days of measured kindness, of nods and small talk, of pretending the whisper hadn't split him open. On the 3rd night, while she slept with her phone tucked beneath her pillow, he slipped from bed and closed the door with care. The house felt complicit, lights low, corners watchful. He sat at the dining table and opened his laptop, the glow turning his hands pale. He began with dates, her aunt's illness, the trips she took alone, the weeks she came back thinner, distracted, smelling of unfamiliar soap. He built a timeline, stacking memories until they pointed somewhere he didn't want to look. The baby in the photo looked 3. The math was merciless. It overlapped with the silence, with the period when hope had been replaced by careful endurance. He enlarged the image he had secretly photographed. Pixels sharpened, a crease in the curtain, a scuff on the floor near the baseboard. His stomach dropped. He had painted over that scuff himself once, kneeling with a brush while she laughed behind him. He shut the laptop, then opened it again, as if denial was a button. Sleep became a rumor. At work, he searched addresses tied to her trips, old receipts, a rental car invoice she must have forgotten to shred. He told himself he was being thorough, rational. In truth, he was circling an answer that kept retreating. Every click felt like betrayal, yet not clicking felt worse. That evening, he asked her a question designed to sound careless. "Do you ever miss the idea of kids?" He watched her face the way one watches a weather line on the horizon. The pause was small. The smile arrived a beat late. Sometimes, she said too quickly, but we're fine. She reached for his hand, then withdrew it as if remembering something. Later, he found the key. It was taped inside a cookbook, a trick she used for spare change and notes. He didn't take it. He memorized the tape's tear, the way it curled. Patience felt like cowardice, but haste felt fatal. On Saturday, she left early, claiming errands. He waited 10 minutes, then went to the drawer again. The photo was gone. In its place, a faint rectangle of dust, a ghost. His heart hammered. He moved through the house, noticing what he had ignored for years. A door kept locked, a room always for storage, a new smell beneath the cleaner, medicinal, sweet. He stood outside the locked door, listening. Silence. He pressed his ear to the wood.
He woke with the dream still echoing, a thin voice tugging him from sleep. Daylight did nothing to soften the certainty that had settled in his chest. If a child existed, someone else existed too, someone woven into her absences and careful lies. He waited for a moment when she left her phone unattended, a rarity he learned to anticipate. That evening, while she showered, steam hissing like a warning, the device rested on the counter. His hands shook as he lifted it, the screen lighting his fear. He told himself he would only look, only confirm his own paranoia. Messages bloomed, ordinary threads, family, work, jokes, and then one name that didn't belong. Saved under a woman's name, it felt deliberate, almost mocking. He opened the conversation and stepped into another life. The tone was intimate without being explicit, coded with references and impatience. Times and places, complaints about waiting, reassurance offered and withdrawn. He felt foolish for missing it, angry at how easily love had trained him. A new message appeared as he read, the screen pulsing softly. He's asking questions. The words were the same whisper he'd overheard, now undeniable. His breath stalled, then rushed back too fast. He scrolled, hunger and dread twisting together. There were photos he didn't open, silhouettes of intimacy that made his vision blur. He locked the phone when he heard the water shut off. She returned wrapped in a towel, eyes alert. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice light. He nodded, forcing calm, and set the phone back where it belonged. Later, he tried a different approach, careful and incomplete. "Do you talk to anyone from before?" he asked, watching her face. She smiled, a practiced curve. "Not really." The lie slid into place with ease. He felt the power shift, subtle but real. He was no longer guessing, he was observing. That night, he slept on the edge of the bed, turned away. When she slept, he stared at the ceiling and mapped what he knew. Another name meant another presence, one close enough to threaten. He considered confrontation, imagined denial sharpening into cruelty. Instead, he chose patience again, though it tasted like fear. The next morning, she left early, phone tucked deep in her bag. He followed her absence through the house, listening. A door at the end of the hall remained closed, as it always did. Behind it, he imagined messages continuing, plans forming. His phone vibrated, then stopped, a phantom echo. He stood before the locked door, hand hovering, knowing the name would lead him there. He pressed his ear to the wood and heard nothing, which felt intentional. The house held its breath, complicit. He stepped back, resolved to learn everything before opening it. Another name in her phone was a map, and maps led somewhere. Tonight, he would watch, collect, and wait. Tomorrow, he would open the room she kept sealed. Whatever lived behind that door had already spoken through her screen. He turned off the lights and stood in the dark, listening for footsteps that never came. Silence settled again, heavier, loaded. From the hallway, the locked door waited, patient as a secret. He knew opening it would change the shape of their lives. He also knew not opening it already had. With that understanding, he finally slept, shallow and alert. Morning would bring a key,
a door, and a child's breath on the other side. He did not know the child yet, but the phone had already introduced him. Another name had become a warning, impossible to ignore. As dawn thinned the dark, he rose and walked toward the end of the hall. He stopped inches from the door, listening for proof of life. What he heard next would demand more than questions. It would demand entry. He reached for the handle, then waited, counting his breaths. Behind the door, something shifted. The sound was small, human, and unmistakable. His hand froze as the house listened with him. He understood then that secrets had weight, and they were awake, watching, waiting, inside his home. The key waited for him in the cookbook, taped beneath the page she always claimed was her favorite. His fingers trembled as he lifted it, turning it over, feeling the familiar curve of metal. The house was quiet, patient, as if it had been holding its breath for this very moment. He paused in the hallway, listening for her footsteps, but there were none. She had left, claiming errands again. He told himself that waiting too long might be worse than facing what was behind the door. The door was small, plain, unassuming. He knelt to insert the key, and it turned with a soft click, reluctant but obedient. The knob felt cold under his palm. When he opened it, the air that escaped smelled faintly of antiseptic, of baby powder, and something else, something metallic, sharp, and unmistakable. He stepped inside slowly, eyes adjusting. Toys, scattered and small, lay across the floor. A worn teddy bear, blocks in careful piles, a tiny plastic car. A small cot with a neatly folded blanket rested in one corner. Drawings were taped to the walls, stick figures, houses, suns. One, in large, childish letters, read, "Mommy and Daddy." His chest tightened. The word Daddy was written in block letters he did not recognize, and the familiar ache of betrayal pinched at his heart. Medicine bottles were arranged on a shelf, some for fever, some for coughs. He noticed the labels, dates recent, prescriptions meant for someone who needed them every day. He realized the child was not only alive, but had been living here, in this house, unseen by him, every morning and every night. The reality pressed against his chest, sharp and unyielding. He crouched and examined the blanket, running his fingers over the soft fabric, imagining the small body it had covered, the breaths it had absorbed. A photograph lay nearby, a small child in a high chair, laughing, holding a spoon. He picked it up. The background was familiar, unmistakable. The dining room, the same room where he had spent countless dinners, unaware that a secret life existed in parallel. He staggered back against the wall, the weight of years of silence pressing down. Questions collided in his mind. Why? How? Who? And why had she chosen to keep him from this for so long? Anger and despair warred with a strange, tender protectiveness. He imagined the child waking, searching for comfort, someone to fill the invisible gap between truth and lies. He could hear the soft hum of the house settling around him, the faint whisper of a life lived in hiding. The door clicked softly behind him as he remembered the key in his pocket, the first step toward unraveling the careful story she had told. He understood in that instant that this room was more than a space. It was a barrier between innocence and deception, a prison built of love and lies intertwined. As he reached to close the door, he heard it, a cough, faint but unmistakable. His heart leapt into his throat. Someone was inside. He froze, holding the photograph, listening. Another cough. He realized the child had been there all along, waiting, unaware of the storm slowly gathering outside the walls. The moment hung between him and the locked world he had just unlocked. He backed away, breathing shallow, mind racing with the knowledge that he could no longer ignore what she had hidden. The room had stayed locked for years, but its secret now demanded attention. Whatever he would do next, the truth had been revealed, and the child, the one who should never have existed in silence, was real, present, and waiting for recognition. The house was no longer empty. He returned to the room the next morning, cautious, quiet. Sunlight spilled through the small window, painting the toys and cot in pale gold. He had rehearsed what he might say, the questions he might ask, but rehearsed words dissolved as soon as he saw him. The boy, no more than 3, sat cross-legged on the floor, building a tower of blocks, humming a tune he didn't recognize. The child looked up at him, brown eyes wide, mouth caught in a moment of curiosity. "Uncle?" he asked, tilting his head. The word hit like a bullet. It was the first acknowledgement of a connection, the one that felt stolen, borrowed, not his own. His chest tightened, a strange mix of fear, longing, and anger coiling inside. He forced a smile, the one reserved for family gatherings, for moments when he pretended nothing was wrong. "Yes," he said softly, kneeling. I'm your uncle." The words felt fragile. The boy beamed, sliding a block toward him. "Stack," he commanded, as if he were the teacher in this game. His laughter was innocent, unknowing, and it cut deeper than any truth could. He watched him closely, studying the gestures, the little quirks that made him human, alive, unmistakably here. He asked simple questions, carefully, measuring tone, gauging reactions. "Who made this tower?" The boy pointed at himself. "I did." His pride was genuine, unguarded, and the man felt a pang of jealousy he couldn't explain. This child had a father, someone he didn't know fully yet, someone who had stolen a place that might have been his. The boy talked freely, sharing.
The next day, he followed a thread he hadn't dared pull before. An address, faintly mentioned in the child's stories, linked to a man he had never met. The phone, the messages, the careful timing of her absences, they all converged on this one person. He had imagined confrontations in his mind, rehearsed fury, threats, denials. Now, standing on the cracked sidewalk outside the house, anticipation and dread battled in his chest. The man answered the door before he could knock. Tall, with a lean face and sharp eyes that immediately sized him up, he carried a calm confidence that unsettled the husband more than anger ever could. "You must be," he began, but the husband didn't finish the introduction. His eyes were fixed on the living room behind the man, where faint giggles hinted at the presence of the boy. "Come in," the man said smoothly, stepping aside. He held the door with a relaxed hand, a gesture of control. Inside, the home was neat, meticulously maintained, almost sterile. He noticed the toys, the small cot, the drawings on the walls, the boy's signature innocence displayed like trophies. The husband felt his stomach twist. This man had not only been present in the boy's life, he had shaped it. They sat across from each other at the dining table. Words were slow, cautious. "So you've met him," the man said, leaning back in his chair. His voice was low, confident. "I imagine this is complicated." The husband didn't speak. He stared, trying to reconcile the casual calm with the betrayal he felt. "Complicated," repeated the man, "because he's important to all of us, not just me." Every phrase was loaded, every smile calculated. The husband realized he had underestimated the depth of the deception. The affair, he had assumed, was a matter of passion, a transient escape. But this man, the boy's biological father, had carefully built a parallel life, one that existed in shadows, yet intertwined with the family he had thought secure. "You're angry," the man said, almost sympathetically. "I understand that, but anger won't change anything. He's mine, in part, and he's here now. You need to accept that." There was no threat in the words, but the weight of them pressed down as if a vice had closed around his chest. Acceptance was impossible. Rage simmered beneath the surface, but he kept it in check, watching, listening. The man continued, casual, almost intimate. "She told me you'd find out eventually. I didn't want this, but he needed a father figure you could provide.
You see, deception isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's protection. Protection. The word echoed in the husband's mind like a challenge, mocking him. As the conversation unfolded, the husband noticed the small gestures, the way the man's eyes flicked toward the child's toys across the room, the soft creases of a father who had already claimed authority in his absence. Every sentence was a puzzle, every smile a calculated edge. The man was charming, manipulative, careful, dangerous in his calm because he controlled the narrative with effortless skill. A message chimed on the man's phone. "If you expose us, the boy disappears." The words were sharp, final. The threat was real. The husband's pulse surged. He understood that the stakes were no longer emotional alone. They were life and safety, innocence and power. He stood abruptly, feeling the room tilt, aware that a decision needed to be made. He had glimpsed the life behind the secrecy, the carefully orchestrated web of lies that his wife and this man had spun together. The boy's laughter drifted from another room, a reminder of the delicate innocence that was caught between two worlds. As he left the house, the man's voice followed, calm, deliberate. "Remember, whatever you do, he is already ours. Think carefully." The husband stepped onto the sidewalk, heart racing. Outside, the air felt thin, charged, heavy with unspoken consequences. He realized the confrontation had only begun. The child's life, the truth, and his own sense of justice were now entangled with this man, the father who had hidden in plain sight. The drive home was a blur. His mind replayed every detail, every phrase, every subtle threat. The child's life depended on what he did next, and the lines between protection, revenge, and love had never felt so impossible to navigate. By the time he reached his front door, he knew one thing with terrifying clarity. He could no longer wait. The next step would change everything, and nothing would ever be the same. Returning home after the confrontation with the boy's biological father, he felt hollow, as if the walls themselves had shifted around him. Every familiar corner of the house seemed altered, suspicious, as though each shadow might hide evidence of the life he had only just discovered. The air smelled faintly of detergent, the lingering aroma of innocence, but he could no longer trust even that. Love, he realized, was a thin veneer, a cover for a calculated, suffocating control. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. He watched her from the doorway, his pulse tight. She noticed him, looked up, and smiled, the smile that had once felt like warmth, now a weapon. "You're home early," she said casually, but her tone carried a subtle edge, a warning. He didn't answer immediately, standing frozen, weighing the consequences of speaking, of remaining silent. Over the next hour, their interactions were carefully choreographed. She guided conversations, inserting flattery, questions designed to distract, and the occasional sharp remark that reminded him of his place. She leaned into him at moments, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder, only to withdraw just as quickly, leaving him unbalanced, craving reassurance he could no longer trust. He tried to probe, to ask about the child, about her relationship with the man who had claimed part of that life. She deflected with practiced ease, laughing lightly, then shifting topics to mundane tasks. "You worry too much. Why can't you enjoy the quiet?" Her words were gentle, but the intent was sharp, designed to make him doubt himself, to question his own sanity. The house itself seemed to conspire with her, silent witness to the games she played. By evening, he had started recording snippets of conversation, subtle attempts to capture the truth without alerting her. But when he checked the files later, they were gone. The recordings had been deleted, leaving only a faint echo of frustration in their absence. He realized then that her control extended beyond manipulation. It was surveillance, preemption, a constant anticipation of his moves. He was never one step ahead. The psychological weight pressed down, relentless. He felt trapped between love and fear, desire and resentment. Every smile, every affectionate gesture carried an invisible thread pulling him into compliance. The lines between affection and domination blurred. The very child he had longed to meet safely was ensnared in a web of power dynamics he didn't fully understand. That night, he lay awake, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Shadows shifted across the walls, the faint hum of appliances forming a backdrop to the tension that filled the house. He thought of the father, the messages, the warnings, and the innocent boy whose life balanced precariously between protection and deception. Control had become a weapon, and love a cage. When she entered the room briefly, retrieving a glass of water, their eyes met. No words were exchanged, but he felt the weight of her awareness pressing against him, measuring, evaluating. He understood then that any step he took could provoke a response calculated to maintain her dominance. He rolled onto his side, heart pounding, and imagined the consequences of revealing everything: the child, the deception, the hidden man. Yet leaving it unspoken felt equally dangerous, a slow erosion of truth, morality, and justice. Every moment stretched the tension thinner until patience itself became a risk. From the shadows, he could hear the faint creak of the floorboards, the subtle shifting of the house settling around secrets, and he knew that tomorrow he would have to act. The child, the lies, and the manipulation demanded confrontation. Control and love had fused into a single suffocating force, and breaking free would require a reckoning that could destroy everything. The lines were drawn. The next move would be decisive. The tension that had been building for weeks erupted that night. He had confronted her once more, carefully, gently at first, but then with the edge of frustration he could no longer contain. Questions about the boy, about the hidden man, about every secret she had kept, hung between them like knives. She responded with practiced calm, deflecting, twisting words into shields, but the calm was brittle, and he could feel it cracking under the weight of truth. When she refused to answer directly, he raised his voice, the sound startling even him.
The aftermath settled in slowly, like smoke curling through the corners of a room long after fire has burned. Sirens had wailed and faded, flashing lights reflected in the walls of their home, leaving shadows that seemed to move with purpose. He sat on the couch, the boy asleep in his arms, small body curled like a fragile flame. The mother had been questioned by the authorities, her story practiced, polished, rehearsed for the inevitable scrutiny. He watched her through a fog of disbelief, aware of how thoroughly she could control a narrative. The three of them, the mother, the boy, and he, were left with a fragile truce, an unspoken agreement that survival required cohesion. Outside, the world expected answers, explanations, and justice. Inside, the truth was a labyrinth of half-statements and selective memory. Every sentence weighed against the possibility of shattering the delicate equilibrium they had established. He had learned, painfully, that reality could be too sharp to live with. Stories, carefully crafted, could dull the edges. They began rehearsing together, quietly, behind closed doors. How they would explain the scratches on the wall, the faint trace of blood, the bruises of a struggle barely visible. They discussed versions of events that allowed the child to remain untouched by guilt or fear. Words were carefully chosen: accident, clumsiness, fall, shock. Each phrase was a stitch in a fabric meant to protect, to contain the chaos, and to shield innocence. He found himself in an unfamiliar role: mediator, protector,
co-conspirator in the crafting of a narrative that bent truth without breaking it. The mother spoke softly, almost lovingly, guiding the boy through what had happened. "It's okay," she whispered repeatedly, as though the repetition alone could transform reality. He joined in, feeling the odd dissonance of lying while hoping for the child's safety, aware that the lines between protection and deceit were now irrevocably blurred. Outside, neighbors whispered, drawn to the sudden quiet, the flashing lights now gone, leaving only questions in the air. They did not know, could not know the complexity behind the smiles, the hushed tones, the careful gestures. Each interaction was a test, a chance to measure how far they could bend the story without breaking it. The world demanded simple truths, but their lives had been built on secrets, and simplicity was impossible. As they sat together that evening, he studied her face. She looked exhausted, the polished mask slipping for brief moments to reveal raw anxiety, regret, and perhaps a hint of relief. He realized she had survived by mastering control, by anticipating reactions, by shaping perception. And yet, she had underestimated the stakes, the intensity of what he would do to protect the boy, to ensure the story kept him safe. They crafted their narrative with meticulous care, each word, each gesture rehearsed. Who said what, when, and how. Even the boy, young as he was coached gently, shielded by layers of selective truth. He marveled at the precision required, at the careful choreography of lies designed to keep bloodshed from staining innocence further. Yet underneath it all, a tension remained, unspoken but palpable. The story they agreed to tell was only a temporary shield. They had survived the immediate threat, but the consequences of the truth, of the hidden father, of the choices that had led to bloodshed, lingered like a shadow in every corner. He held the boy tighter, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down, aware that while words could protect for now, they could never undo what had been done. The night stretched on, calm but uneasy. In the soft hum of the refrigerator, in the faint creak of settling wood, he could feel the house itself breathing alongside them, keeping secrets, remembering events, guarding truths they would never fully reveal. The story they agreed to tell would guide their interactions, protect the child, and deflect questions, but it was fragile. And in the morning, when sunlight hit the windows and the world resumed its demands, they would have to live inside it, balancing the fragile narrative against the weight of reality, knowing that one misstep could undo everything. In that quiet, he realized that the story was not just a lie. It was a survival pact, a promise forged in fear, blood, and love. And tomorrow, they would act, speak, and move according to the carefully constructed script, the story that could keep them whole, if only for a moment longer. Weeks passed after the chaos, each day feeling heavier than the last. The story they had agreed to tell had become routine, a fragile shield against scrutiny and suspicion. Yet beneath the carefully constructed words and rehearsed gestures, a quiet tension simmered. He watched the boy, now more comfortable, more trusting, and could feel the bond forming in real time. Every laugh, every touch, every whispered request tugged at a part of him he hadn't known existed. This child, hidden for so long, was becoming his son in ways that no legal papers could define. The mother moved through the house with cautious grace, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance. She spoke softly, guiding the boy through his days, weaving explanations that kept the truth in shadows while providing comfort. He observed her, recognizing a duality he had never fully understood, the fierce protectiveness that once masked deception, now intertwined with genuine love. He felt a complicated mix of gratitude and resentment, acknowledging her skill in keeping him safe while resenting the years of lies that had led to this point. One evening, as the boy played quietly with blocks on the living room rug, he sat beside him. "Do you know who made this tower?" he asked gently. The boy looked up, eyes bright, and grinned. "I did, with Uncle's help." The word uncle had once felt awkward, foreign, a placeholder for a connection he had not yet earned. Now it carried warmth, responsibility, and a deep sense of belonging. He smiled back, letting the role settle over him like a second skin, realizing that he would protect this boy no matter the cost. Later, the mother joined them, carrying a tray of smacks. She placed it on the coffee table, glancing at both of them with a subtle acknowledgement of the evolving family dynamic. "He's learning fast," she said, tone neutral but soft. Her eyes flicked briefly to him, measuring, calculating, as if confirming that he understood the boundaries. I nodded, silently affirming that the boy's well-being came first. At bedtime, he tucked the child into the small cot, smoothing the blanket over him. "Good night," he whispered. The boy reached up, hugging him tightly. "Good night, Uncle. And Dad?" The question hung in the air, fragile and trembling. He froze, heart thudding. It was the first time the word Dad had been used in his presence, unprompted, unguarded. It was a declaration, a claim, and a responsibility he could no longer deny. He kissed the boy's forehead, voice thick with emotion. "Yes, our son," he murmured, the words tasting of both fear and resolve. The admission felt monumental, heavier than any secret, yet freeing in its honesty. For the first time, the child had a name for the bond they shared, a word that carried both love and protection, bridging the gap between deception and truth. After the boy drifted into sleep, he and the mother remained in the living room, the house quiet but alive with unspoken tension. "He'll need both of us," she said softly, breaking the silence. He nodded, understanding the layered meaning. This was not only about the child, but also about negotiating the fragile truce, maintaining control while nurturing trust. He walked through the house, pausing by the locked door that once hid so many secrets. The room now stood as a testament to truth revealed, a place that could no longer contain lies. In the quiet, he felt the weight of responsibility, the inescapable bond forged by blood, love, and survival. For the first time since the revelations began, he allowed himself a small measure of hope. The boy, sleeping peacefully in the cot, was not just a symbol of secrets kept or lies told. He was a reminder that even amidst betrayal, manipulation, and danger, something genuine could emerge. Our son, a declaration of connection, a promise of protection, and the center around which their fractured lives could begin to revolve. The night stretched on, calm but charged with potential, and he realized that whatever trials awaited, they would face them together. The boy had a father, whether the world recognized it or not, and in that acknowledgement, a fragile, unbreakable truth had been cemented. He was no longer merely an observer of lies, but a guardian of the only thing that truly mattered: the child.